So today I want to tell you a little bit about my story, my experience with having AFib and how I have put that into remission with my lifestyle changes, which include a carnivore diet. So to tell you about my AFib story, we really have to go back to the beginning of 2018 when I first got diagnosed with AFib. Now, a little bit more backstory. I lost about a little over 100 pounds in 2017. This was doing a diet that was kind of somewhat low carb, but was also low fat. And it was, I guess, a good way to lose weight, but it wasn't very sustainable for me because I wasn't really eating carbs, wasn't really eating fat. And therefore, my body was kind of always hungry all the time. It was, one of those where you restrict how much you're eating, that kind of stuff. And so I did lose a lot of weight, but I couldn't sustain it. And by mid 2018, I had gained all that weight back plus a little bit more. So it's now, I'd say it's right around that time frame. Maybe I hadn't quite gained all the weight back yet, but I started to have issues with irregular heartbeats. And at first, I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but I went to the ER and they diagnosed me with AFib. And at that point, I got a cardiologist. And so let's see, this was 2018. So this was 7 years ago. So I guess I was 44 years old at that point. For a 44-year-old, it's kind of a bit young to get AFib, but there are definitely cases of people that had AFib that were that young. And so he told me that I couldn't really do a whole lot about it. It was genetic, he said. My father did have AFib, but he said it was genetic and that I would not have any way of getting rid of it permanently, and that it would just be a matter of when it would happen again. And, there's nothing I could do about that. So it did indeed happen again a few months later. And each time for me, I seemed to get back out of it on my own, except for one time. This was back in, I think it was 2020. I couldn't seem to get out of my own over like a day or two or whatever. I was in the hospital and they decided to shock my heart back into rhythm. So it's a procedure they do to put you to sleep. And just like you're thinking, like with the paddles, they shock your heart and make it go back into rhythm, essentially. That doesn't always work for everybody, but it did work for me. So that worked that particular time. And, it just continued to get worse, like the cardiologist said it would. So now this takes me to 2022, and this is in the spring of 2022. I'm having a good 2 to 3 episodes a week. So what I consider an A-Fib episode is I go into A-Fib. I clearly can tell it's A-Fib. I can see the irregular heartbeat and everything, and the racing up and down with my heart. And I would be in it anytime from like an hour, a few hours, something like that, and then I would go back out of it. Now, I was taking a blood thinner and a beta blocker to lower my heart rate to kind of help with that. And it's possible that beta blocker, that beta blocker was helping my heart rate to get lower and helping me to get out of AFib. But that's what was happening. I'd go out of it back on my own, basically. And that was happening at least 2 to 3 times a week. And that was in 2022, spring of 2022. I decided that I needed to lose weight, and maybe that would help with the AFib and I wouldn't be having as many episodes and stuff. But I definitely needed to lose weight. I had other issues, back pain, and just other stuff that going on. But I want to keep this, geared towards AFib here. So I decided at that point that I was going to try the keto diet. And I did that for about 2 to 3 months. I did lose a little bit of weight, not a lot. Didn't make a difference, though, with things like my back pain and stuff like that, or my AFib. So 2 to 3 episodes a week. I could make it even more than 2 to 3 a week if I wanted, because I found that anytime I listed lifted heavy weights, I would get myself into A-Fib. If I did it for more than like 5 minutes, I would go into A-Fib. So at this point, I had been researching already the carnivore diet. I had been watching Dr. Ken Berry and his videos, and I saw he had some videos a little bit about A-Fib too, and he was saying that it had a lot to do with eating carbs, eating sugar, that kind of stuff. So I went straight into carnivore at that point, and really quickly, within a few weeks, I noticed that the A-Fib was gone. And when I say gone, I mean just that I wasn't having any more A-Fib episodes, at least. So that took me over like the next year, right? So we're now in like fall of 2023 time frame, and I go back to my cardiologist again because I've been seeing him like every 6 months, and we're now over a year, definitely getting close to a year and a half without any A-Fib episodes. And he, at that point, said, let's go ahead and take you off the blood thinner. I feel pretty good. You've lost weight. I think that your risk for going into A-Fib and your risk for stroke has gone down. So I'm going to go ahead and take you off that. So at that point, I continued to do the thing I was doing with carnivore and so forth, and continued to go without any A-Fib episodes. And then he also said he'd see me again in a year and wanted to check over things, do a stress test, that kind of stuff. So then in the fall, like November, December timeframe, I guess, of 2024, went back to the cardiologist and everything was still good. The stress test was pretty good, and no signs of A-Fib. One thing I forgot to mention was back in 2023, he did have me wear a heart monitor for 30 days to make sure that I wasn't going in and out of A-Fib without even knowing it, and that seemed to be fine. There were no issues there. So A-Fib, it's been over 3 years without an episode, and that's why I say that I'm in remission, because I feel like if I went back to eating a standard diet where there was a lot of sugar and carbs, that it would just be a matter of time before I went back into A-Fib again. So, I think that enough damage had been done to my body that, put me into A-Fib to begin with, that it wouldn't take long for me, a few months or something maybe of eating that way, that I would start to put myself back into the same thing, right? Like, you look at somebody that had diabetes or something and they go to carnivore and they get rid of their diabetes. Basically, they no longer have that issue. If they went back to the way they were eating before, they have to assume that eventually they're going to go back into diabetes. So it would be no different with A-Fib, and that's how I look at it. And that's why I say that, technically I'm probably like in remission, not that I've cured A-Fib or anything like that. Okay, but so let's go into really quickly what I've done with carnivore and other things to, improve or put myself into remission on A-Fib. And basically, when I first started out, it was a lot of beef, a lot of chicken, a lot of pork, a lot of that kind of stuff, and a little bit of eggs, and just staying away from carbs. As I continued with carnivore, it's been more so beef and eggs for me. Occasionally I have like bacon, that kind of stuff, a little bit of seafood here and there, some chicken wings or chicken thighs occasionally. And maybe every once in a while, like once a month or two, I'll have some other type of pork, like, pork butt or something like that. So it's mostly a lot of beef, a lot of eggs really for me. And I'd say even more so lately, it's been more beef and not quite as many eggs, though I still do eat eggs. I've also added in a little bit more dairy lately. I know that's kind of an interesting subject, because some people say, dairy is going to cause weight stalls and so forth, and it definitely can for people. And some people just tend to have issues with dairy. They could have some sort of allergy type of thing, skin reactions, that kind of stuff. I don't seem to have those issues. And I've actually lost a little bit of weight here, a few pounds in the last week or two. And that's with adding more so dairy back into my diet. So interesting there. But that's kind of what I've done. It's following a carnivore diet, being fairly strict in it, but not always that strict, but being fairly strict to it. and, exercising too. I don't always exercise, but there have been times that I've done a lot of exercising. And, I told you before that with A-Fib, I was able to, before Carnivore, I was able to actually find that I could put myself into an A-Fib episode by lifting heavy weights. Now I can do 45 minutes to an hour even of pretty strenuous heavy weight lifting, and it does not put me into A-Fib. So I really, really believe that it was my eating habits, the carnivore diet, that saved myself and put myself into remission from A-Fib. And I don't know if this will work for everybody. It's worked for me. I have what they call, I believe it's called paroxysmal A-Fib. So it's where you go into it and go back out of it on your own. So it's not permanent A-Fib, but that's what I've had. If you're somebody out there that has permanent A-Fib, you're in A-Fib all the time, and the only way you can get out of it is possibly with like an ablation or something to that effect. Maybe doing the shock, that I forget exactly what they call that term, where you shock your heart back into rhythm. That might actually work for you as well. In some cases, I've heard people with permanent A-Fib that does work, at least for a short time. Other people I've heard it didn't work at all for them. But, for my type of A-Fib, definitely, I think it has a lot to do with the sugar intake and probably electrolytes. I think, my magnesium and potassium is pretty good. I do take an electrolyte drink when I've worked out a lot or something, or sweating a lot. Otherwise, I drink a lot of water, where I'll put some salt in my mouth before and then drink down the water and stuff. So I'm getting a good amount of sodium, that kind of thing. So I think that my electrolytes are in a really good place. There's a lot of magnesium in my food that I eat as well. And I think that that's going good. When you look at my blood work, my sodium levels, my magnesium levels, my potassium levels are all really good. So I think that has a lot to do with the A-Fib as well. And that's what I've done. Can't say that it'll work for you, but if you're kind of in a similar situation where you have A-Fib and it's been intermittent, where you go into episodes and back out of the episodes and so forth, I think that you should really give Carnivore a try, because I think that most likely has more to do with electronic signaling and not an issue with the heart. And I know A-Fib is an electronic signaling thing, but it could be like your vagus nerve, for instance, has had too much insulin and it's sending signals wrong, that kind of thing, right? So definitely, I would say give it a try if you think that it could work. Carnivore, basically just drinking water and eating meat. If you can, try and eat as much beef as possible and see how that works. Give yourself 60, 90 days and see if that improves your A-Fib symptoms.